What is up, YouTube? That's here today. I'm super excited to be back playing more Pokemon VGC content. Today, what we're going to be doing is going over a Regulation C roadmap. Going over, like, literally anything and everything I feel you guys need to know to build the best possible VGC teams going forward into the Regulation C rule set that starts on April 1st. This rule set's going to last 3 months, and that is a long time, so there's a ton of stuff to cover. But before we get into it, I just want to say this is not a scripted video. I'm just basically going to be talking about what the regulation mods bring to the table, possible Terra types, EVs, item choices, and then possible partners, just to get everyone basically on the same page. So if you guys want to see more content like this, think about letting me know in the comments below, and yeah, let's just hop right into it. So let's go on to Pokemon Showdown and bring up the Regulation C Pokemon. The only real changes going up into this format is we're going to see the addition of 4 Pokemon. And I actually think, as someone who goes to regionals, changing 4 Pokemon for 3 months, that's like our whole season. So I'm not going to lie, people are going to, the number one comment everyone's going to say is, well, what do you think about the rules? I really feel like this is more of a Series 2.5 than like a whole new series, because yeah, these Pokemon do change things, but they don't change things as much as like a home update would. And so I really wish that maybe this lasted for a month or two. I feel like this could be fun for just a little while, but not necessarily for 3 months. That's like our whole season. That being said, they're still pretty cool. So we got Ting Wu, and then we're gonna have Wo-Chen, live Wo-Chen reactions today. So yeah, the big thing that all these Pokemon bring to the table are their abilities. They have different tablets. So we have tablets of Ruin on the Wo-Chen. It's going to make it so basically every single active Pokemon, both yours and your opponents, are going to get affected by all these different abilities. Wo-Chen drops everyone's attacks, so it's going to make your teammates bulkier and have you deal less damage if you have like an aggressive teammate. Ting Wu is going to make their special attacks lowered, right? Chidu is going to Chidu is not going to multiply. Chidu is going to shred your opponent's special defense, and what is it? Shinpow is going to shred your Pokemon's defense stats. So basically, you have it split into 2 groups. You can either play aggressive with things like Shinpow and Chidu, or defensive with things like Ting Wu and Wo-Chen. I do think, realistically, there are also 2 groups of playstyles to go into this format with. You could play someone that wants to utilize these Ruin Pokemon to power up your own Pokemon, or mitigate the effectiveness of your opponent's Pokemon, and use them as a part of your team building strategy. Or you can do something like punish people for new toy syndrome, punish people for trying to be a little bit too outside the box. And I realistically think for the first maybe month of the format, everyone's going to try and use at least 1, maybe 2 of these on their team. And if they have more than 1 of these Pokemon on their team, we're going to find situations where, like, for example, one of the best cores in the game right now is Flutter and Bundle, right? And they can't have both Flutter and Bundle on the board at the same time if they want to utilize these Ruin Pokemon. Right, so that actually, if they want to utilize these Pokemon and it's an integral part of their strategy, that's going to be lowering their speed tier, right? So instead of having to outspeed like a base 135 and 136 Pokemon, we're going to pull those Pokemon up here just so you guys can actually see. Instead of having a board that looks like this, I'm going to open up my menu there too, so you don't have to listen to Shinpow forever. Shinpow is the only Ruin mod that I have, and it's I'm borrowing it anyways from one of my mods. But yeah, so normally like a really aggressive board from a turn 1 that you always have to respect with your speed tiers, like your Tailwinds, would be something like Bundle with a 136 and Flundle with a 135. So what this changes then is if your opponent wants to then say put a Chidu in one of these spots, they could have Bundle and Chidu, or they could have Bundle and Flutter. And that changes things because Chidu is going to have to actually use its 100 base speed. So instead of having to have 2 Mons through the use of like a Choice Scarf and a Booster Energy, or like a Tailwind and a Choice Scarf or Booster Energy, or some other damage or speed multiplier, you now actually only have to speed 1 Fast Mon and then the Chidu. So you basically only have to outspeed the Chidu now, which means when dealing with aggressive teams like this, it's really going to slow down the game a lot. Right, it's going to slow down the game a lot because something like a Bundle or a Flutter could be dealt with through the use of like Fake Out into Bundle. You could use a Quash. You could use a Redirection move in a lot of those situations as well. So in those situations, all you have to do is outspeed. So for example, if you're going to be going against like Bundle Chiyu, you might be able to realistically bring something like a Sableye and then just any Mon that would outspeed Chiyu. And there's actually a lot of Mons that outspeed Chiyu. So if we take a look at base speeds here, we can see all the Mons in the format. there's a lot of things that just outspeed Chidu that would have good matchups versus Chidu. Heck, you could use like a Float Soul, or this is going to unlock abilities for things like Iron Valiant to be good. I've also said that things like Lucario are going to be good in this format. Lucario's good against all 4 of these Pokemon, and like a Jolly Lucario is faster than like a modest Chidu. So there's a bunch of situations where the fact that if they want to actually use these strategies, it's going to slow their team down a lot, and it's going to break up a bunch of the little 2-mon cores that we have going on, have had going on since Series 1 and Series 2. A couple other 2-mon cores that are really, really popular, like Dondozo and Tatsugiri. These Pokemon don't really fit on those schemes because they have to have both active at the same time. Let's think of another popular like 2-mon core, something like, Indeedee and Armourouge. Now, you could add any of these Rudimons into those teams, right? But they're not going to be lead options. These are mons that come in mid-game, maybe deliver the finishing blow, or you swap in and get the added effect of their tablet effect for 1 turn. So, realistically, leads aren't changing all that often, and if they are changing, all they're doing is becoming a little bit slower, a little bit easier to manage. So, that's why I think this is a cool format for, like, I feel it's going to be a cool format for like a month, but it's going to get really, really stale, in my opinion. That is also just my opinion. If you guys disagree with me and you think they're completely broken and completely change the game, let me know. I will say that these Pokemon have pretty good base stats. Let's check. Let's just sort it by base stats. These Pokemon have pretty decent base stats. They're going to be 570s, which are great. But you can see there's other Pokemon like Roaring Moon that we already have that have higher base stats. Tyranitar has higher base stats. Garchomp has higher base stats. So that's one of those things that these Rune Pokemon are really cool, and they do add ways to play the game, but I don't think they really take the spots of a lot of Pokemon that we already have. And yes, people are going to use these, and there's going to be a lot of fun. But after about a month or 2 with this, people are going to realize that, like, yeah, Wo-Chen's really cool, but like it gets like Leech Seed and Pollen Puff. Like Amoonguss does that basically the same, almost a little bit better. So it's cool to use things like this, but there are better options. Ting Wu, it mitigates your opponent's like special attack stat, but like instead of running a Ting Wu that has to use like Fisher and has like a, I'm not gonna lie, it's a good stat spread. You could just use a Mouse Hold instead of like both Ting Wu or Wo-Chen already with Friend Guard. Friend Guard is a huge boost to your teammate, and if your whole point is to be like a bulky wall while preserving your teammates and playing that support role, a Friend Guard user is probably going to be better. Same thing for Chiyu. Chiyu's great, and I think Chiyu's probably will be the one that sticks around the most, just because it enables so many of the good Paradox Pokemon. But if I had to choose, I'd rather use a Flutter. If I had to choose, I'd probably rather use a Bundle. If I had to choose, there are 4 or 5 other Pokemon that do a similar enough job that I would already want to use over this thing. I'm forcing myself to use these, right? And it's not just because I don't really like them. It's because they're a double-edged sword. Like, the risk-reward for using these this early on in the format, it's not always worth it. So that's why when I talked about it at the beginning of the video, I said there's 2 categories. You could fall into the type of person that punishes people for trying to innovate, and where you just get your wins, and you basically get yourself to a high enough point in the ladder to where when the meta actually settles, you're fighting against the actual people that are going to be competing at regionals and world championships and things like that. Or you just kind of try your best to throw whatever you want at the wall and see what sticks. Like, it really depends on how you learn. And I think realistically, if I were to build a team to go really, really high up on the ladder or play in like a big tournament, I would be something that punished these mons for existing, adding things like Scizors and other mons just that have great type advantages against all these. Even things like Slitherwing are going to come back and be like really, really good anti-meta picks because they're so good versus all these, and they're going to be almost guaranteed at least to be a one of on every single team. So after we have gone through that, again, these are just my ideas on the format so far. Let's take a look at each of these Pokemon and kind of go over some common cores, common abilities, not abilities, but like items, terras, things like that. So we're going to take a look at Shinpow first, because that's just the first one that I had here. Obviously, Shinpow likes to get paired with things that have like big physical attacks. We're actually going to take a look at my in-game for just 1 second. I was like messing around with the Shinpow team that I'm going to be posting on Patreon in just a little bit. And the whole point of this team is to be like super standard. It has like obviously the Shinpow. It's going to have things like Lucario. I think Lucario is going to be a decent option in this format. Bullet Punch breaks Flutter. If you have this sort of Ruin and a Life Orb on it, you can go for a normal Terra E-Speed to be able to basically function like a Dragonite with Inner Focus. You have the big close combat to break things like the Ting Wu and the Wo-Chen. So it's actually, and Baxcalibur as well. It's a pretty decent Pokemon. We've been talking about it for a little bit. You also have things like, Arcanine Standard, Banded Arcanine, great partner for Shinpow to capitalize on the fact that you're shredding your opponent's defense. If you normal Terra, gain that normal typing, you actually just one-shot a lot of mons. So it's actually really, really good. Choice Scarf Annihilate, very standard. Gotta have one Defiant Mon to keep Intimidate Mons off your team. And I just threw a Palafin on here. I might end up making this something like a Glamour instead. And this is gonna eventually be a Imprisoned Trick Room Howl Play Rough Screamtail. It's going to be really, really cool when I finish EV training. I'll do that on stream a little bit later this week. So, yeah, I think Shinpow is the easiest to play of the bunch because you kind of just throw a sash on it or throw whatever item you want, and you just slam in with really, really big moves. Another cool thing about Shinpow is you're using, like, bullet punches, extreme speeds. A lot of people like to pair, like, Mimikyus with Shadow Sneak or things like Jet Punch Palafin on there. And Shinpow gets access to Ice Spinner. So it's going to be able to take away that Psychic terrain so you can just continually go for a bunch of, priority moves and just roll your opponent over before they even know what happens. Another really popular Pokemon here is Dragonite that people like to pair with it. I like Arcanine a little bit more on aggressive teams like this because it's the only real defensive hit on the team. So you can lead like Shinpow and like Palafin, and you can flip turn or hard switch, bring in your Arcanine, and then it basically functions the same way as Dragonite, but it adds that Intimidate boost to give your Pokemon just a little bit more, board presence and protection moving forward. So Shinpow, very, very easy to play. If we take a look at some of the moves that it gets, obviously I think Protect is going to be a must on almost all of these Ruin Mons unless they're choice items, just because you need to elongate their presence on the board to actually make use of their abilities. So Protect can be really good on this guy. And then as for the rest of the moves, we already talked about the value of like Ice Spinner. I think a lot of people like to maybe think about Sucker Punch or Throat Chop. Those are really good options here. It also gets like Sacred Sword. And for this last spot, there's like 5 or 6 other really, really good moves that pop out. Haze for being able to break down Dozo. You can just have a sash on Shinpow. They get up their Dozo combo, you come out and you go Haze, and you're like, that's the game, boys. Like that's literally it. Another thing that we can get is like Ice Shard, Sucker Punch is really good, Icy Wind can be good, Psychic Fangs can be good. Ruination is a move that all of them get. It's basically like a Super Fang that, little known fact, if your opponent is at 1 HP, you can Ruination or Super Fang to actually KO them because it has to take half. That's what these things do. It takes half, or what does it actually say? Ruination right here. So it does damage equal to half the target's current HP, and if they're at 1, they get KO'd. So it's a really cool thing. Gets access to Sucker Punch, Taunt, Terra Blast, all those other really good things. I really think that it's going to probably be a 2-attacker Mon with either like an Ice and Fighting or Ice and Dark. And then the last move is probably going to be a support move like Taunt, Haze, things like that. You might see a priority move there in some situations like Ice Shot or Sucker Punch. Obviously, like we said, this thing likes to go Sash, and there's nothing really wrong with double dipping your Dark or Ice Terra, just because you actually need those damage multipliers to get those one-shots on things. But you can also think about maybe going with like defensive Terras too. Things like Ghost to be able to block Fake Outs is always really nice, and since there are going to be so many other big normal Terra E-Speed Mons, being able to go Ghost to avoid that's good. Also, Ghost Terra makes it so you avoid like fighting attacks, something you're severely weak against, and remember, normal attacks, fighting attacks, things like that, those are going to be physical, and so there's going to be a lot of that stuff running around. So I think it's a pretty good idea to think about maybe going Ghost. And obviously with this guy, it's the easiest one to play out of the bunch. Focus Sash. Most people would tend to just go 252, 252 squad on this guy. Actually, it is better to go Sped F or Defense in that situation just because it's so much lower. Good stat line though. 135 is a really good speed stat. It's the same exact number as Fluttermane. So we're going to start to see a lot of situations where this guy like speed ties Fluttermane. I wouldn't be surprised to see people running like Steel, Terra Blast, trying to like speed tie other Flutters, or even adding some way to get just a little bit more speed. Like, I think Shinpow Bundle on like a Hail team could be really cool because you can Icy when they're Flutter and finish off their Flutter with the Shinpow before it even attacks. And that's actually like a really, really cool way to play it. So, and it plays on their Sash. Like, it's really, really cool. I think Shinpow is probably, it's my favorite one. It's very, very easy to play, but I think it's probably my favorite one. And overall, just a pretty good Pokemon. Like we said, pair it with things like Dragonite, pair it with like a bunch of the other Mons that I listed here, and it should be good. I think Scizor is another Mon that's going to be a very good partner for Shinpow moving forward, because they cover up for each other's weaknesses very well and punish the things that would normally hit each other, barring both weakness to fire, which can be covered up with a couple other Pokemon. So let's take a look at Chidu here. Chidu can be built 4 or 5 different ways. There's a bunch of common items that this thing likes to use. I think the easiest one that most people like to look at are going to be like Scarf Sets. Scarf Sets basically make it like a secondary Flutter or like a secondary Bundle. And the reason why we call them like Bundle and Flutters is because there's just huge special attackers that are hit hard and hit fast. Choice Scarf's pretty standard. It's going to give you a 1.5 speed boost, and it's going to let you outspeed most of what you need to outspeed. Other items on like very, very safe Tailwind teams, you're going to be seeing things like the Choice Specs, basically making it like a fast Torkoal, right? Being able to go for huge beads of Ruin, shredding their Sped F like Heat Wave. So Specs is another solid option. On both of those, you would probably see something like a Ghost Terra, mostly just to avoid fake outs. But again, just similar to Shinpow, you're avoiding fighting, you're avoiding normal, things like that. Ghost Terra is very, very solid on those. Sometimes you might see the Dark or Fire on the Specs one, just to be able to double dip your stab if you need it, kind of like how people like to play Torkoal. Other items that will see play, though, I think lefties will eventually see play. It's basically built just like a Flutter Mane. It has a low base HP, it has a decent speed, it has a great SPDF and great special attack, right? So I think this is going to be very similar to Flutter Mane. So something like a Leftovers subset or like a Leftovers Nasty Plot set could work. I think the set that a lot of people are going to gravitate towards eventually is going to be an AV set, just because I feel that people aren't going to like being locked into specific moves. They're going to want just a little bit more freedom. And this makes it so you can swap. You can make your team really, really weak to a lot of things. For example, like Flutter Mane. You can make yourself super weak to like opposing Flutter Mane Shadow Balls. You know you can switch in your Chidu and just absolutely wall their Flutter Mane. You have an absolute free. You basically play this like an AV tar, and you make it just a free pivot into whatever special attack stat you really want to drop. So I think, or not drop, but you get the idea. You just mitigate all the damage. So popper moves on this thing are going to be things like Heat Wave, obviously, things like Dark Pulse. But then from there, we don't really have that many like decent moves. I will also say that you can play this thing on Trick Room as well. Absolutely fine. It's not too fast to not work on Trick Room. There's actually a couple popular teams from like right when the games came out that had like Fargiraf and Chiyu on them, and they were very, very good. Because Chiyu can function and punish other Trick Room teams. So even if you go with like a speed reduced one, it's still fast enough to bully other Trick Room teams and like bully out Armor Rouges. Which Chiyu is going to heavily disincentivize Armor Rouge Unity if that's like a bad matchup that you have. It's not going to be around much longer. You can bully those, but even if you get up Trick Room, you're still going to underspeed a lot of stuff. So it's actually still really, really good. One set that I've actually really liked a lot, just throwing it out there, is you go Weakness Policy Chiyu, and you go Weakness Policy with like a Bronzong, and you set the Trick Room with Bronzong, you like protect turn 1 with Chiyu, and then you would go Bulldoze, break your opponent's sashes, Policy Proc yourself, make yourself slower for after you get a double KO. The next things you come and you still under speed, and then you just absolutely melt something with like a Heat Wave or something. Really, really cool set. It's probably one of my favorites right now. Bronzong Chiyu seems really, really strong. And also has like access to like gravity, which other like hypnosis and other cool things too. So yeah, Heat Wave, Dark Pulse, very, very standard. But then from there, you see we're actually, let's just sort this by special and see like what Chiyu actually still has to bring to the table. You can go with like a Fire Blast or a Flamethrower. Some people like the Lava Plume or an Overheat. But realistically, something like Psychic isn't really going to be that strong. So like a Psychic, even if it's super effective, it's not stabbed. So you're only going to go to like a 180 versus like a Fire Blast is basically about that strong already just because of the 1.5 boost from the stab. So you might see something like Runation. Sometimes you see like a Grass Terra with like a Terra Blast. These are all pretty standard. What I like to do if I'm not playing, if I'm using like an AV set, I would probably put something like Flame Charge here and play it on like a niche set that can get a little bit faster. Flame Charge does give a speed boost, so it's actually a really unique move that like I feel like Chiyu is one of the few Pokemon that can actually utilize it correctly. And then I would realistically put something like an Overheat here, right? Overheat is going to be stronger than something like that Psychic would be. And you can just come out and pop, like absolutely delete something. You could put Fire Blast here. You could even put a Terra Blast here and go with a different set if you want. But this is kind of what I'm just looking at. And again, if you want to build it with like lefties, protect, taunts, will-o-wisps, it has all those options. I just think realistically most people are going to be using Dark Pulse, Heat Wave. The effectiveness of these Ruin Pokemon is they shred the stats of, or buff up the stats of like all the other mons on the board. So Chiyu actually, the biggest thing Chiyu does is it enables like your Flutter Mane, your Goldango, your Iron Bundle, your Sylveon to actually do more damage. So that's where the real value in this Pokemon is. So going up next into, let's go for some live Wo-Chan reactions. So I've seen so many people talk about how this is like the coolest mon in the format, and I have the absolute hottest take. This Pokemon would never see play in like another format, because basically the big thing that this thing gets is Leech Seed, right? Like that's the thing. It gets Leech Seed, and it gets like Pollen Puff, and then some people want to go with like Ruination. It goes really well in like Garg teams, Like it's just a pretty standard looking mon. But let's compare it to like other Leech Seed users. Things like historically like Ferrothorn, one of the best Leech Seed users ever made. Celesteela, amazing Pokemon. Those Pokemon aren't in this format. But if they were in this format, would I want to run them? No, if I wanted to play a stall game, I'd probably just play a Garg. Now, like I said, you do play Wo-Chan with Garg, but I'd rather play something else, is what I'm trying to say. And so, if I wouldn't play something that's literally better than this thing, why would I play this thing? That being said, we don't have that many good Leech Seed users. So if you're looking to play a Leech Seed really, really bulky game with like maybe use like a Glamora, a Mungus, Wo-Chen, you see how that's, and like a Garg, super stall. Wo-Chen is the Pokemon you have to use. Like there aren't really that great Leech Seed users in this format. You know, you got like Jumpluff, they're all sweepers, right? So Wo-Chen's the best that we have, but I feel it's just really, really underwhelming. And again, everything without the Tablets of Ruin, like, basically loses a little bit of attack stat. I'd rather just use, like, a Frengardmon or something. I feel like this Pokemon's very underwhelming, but that being said, I have really liked testing with Fairy Terra on it, because you basically lose that weakness to, like, Bug, to 4 times weakness to Bug. And we're going to see a lot more Bug in this format, so Fairy stops that, and you also gain a resistance to fighting. So I think that realistically, that's probably how I would be playing this thing. And you could also build it with like a Leftovers or a Covert Cloak. I think Covert Cloak's actually a lot better because it makes it so you can just 100% wall their Garg. So you're like unbreakable, and you can't get fake outed. So I like this thing with Covert Cloak. And then you also seeing the situation here that like we just don't have the restoration. So you have to pair this with like other Pollen Puff Mons. You have to pair this with like any other Mons that can somehow get HP back to their teammates. Maybe like even like a Wish Pass or something that's actually like bad. I feel like this thing just kind of waits around to die. It doesn't set TR. It doesn't really have that great speed control. If we check out some other moves that it gets, it has like decent special attack if you want to go special attack. Like that's not bad. Speed's not even bad either. I'm assuming people are going to be playing this in Trick Room with, like I said, like, you know, Garg, maybe a little bit of Entity Armarouge, Clamora, Amoonguss, stuff like that. But I feel like just a Wide Guard or a Frengard user is probably better. And I know there's probably like people like, oh man, you guys know what he's talking about. It's a legendary. It's so good. It's like, it's not bad. It's just, it's not 3 months of like my competitive Pokemon Scarlet and Violet time good, right? So if there's 4 Mons being added for the next 3 months, that's like 3 weeks dedicated to like each Mon. It's not 3 weeks of my life good. You know, it's good. I'll use it. It gets cool stuff like knockoff, foul play. It gets some screens, you know. That's cool. But there are like better versions that Mons that do every single one of those things. There's better screens users. There's better knockoff users. There's better Pollen Puff users like Amoonguss. Amoonguss is great. Like, this does not take the spot of Amoonguss in so many teams. It doesn't have the Spore. It doesn't have the Rage Powder. It's just kind of okay. It's just kind of okay. If you guys have different thoughts on it, change my mind in the comments. Like, feel free. Like, I'd be 100% down to learning more about this thing. But from the testing that I've done, this thing just seems really underwhelming. Ting Wu. Ting Wu is the last one. I will say this is the one that I've had the least amount of experience building with. But I know the one thing everyone uses on is Fisher, right? And the thing about Fisher is this. Can you get rank 1 online with Fisher? Yes. Can you win like a big, huge tournament with Fisher? Yeah. Are you realistically going to do well at a regional if your team is built around featuring Fisher? Probably not. It's cool, but like the thing about it is what you're actively choosing. We had this argument about the Quick Claw the other day. Is it cool when it works? Oh yeah. Is it like what you need to be doing to win the most like sweaty, serious, try-hard way if that's what you want to do? It's not. And that being said, Ting Wu is very similar to a lot of the other Pokemon we listed. Like, it has really good stats. It gets great base HP for what these stat lines are. And it's slow, but not slow enough. I wish it was like 30 or slower, obviously. I just feel like it just doesn't really bring enough. One, Intimidate, this thing's turned off forever, right? Because like it gets like Earthquake, it gets Body Press, it gets the Ruination, it gets Hazards, and singles, this guy's a beast, right? It gets Throat Chop, it gets Taunt. You basically have to Fisher and play like Stall, right? And so, again, I think there's better Pokemon that do that already. Like, there's a lot of good mons that just get Fisher. Like, even just an unaware Dozo is probably a better Fisher user. Or even something like a Fisher Garg might be a better Fisher user than Ting Wu. And, again, I don't want to say that these mons are bad, but they're not like 3 weeks of my life to, like, find out ways to make them the best that they can be good. I just feel like there's no reason to run these over, like, half of the Paradox mons that we have now. And I don't want to be a Debbie Downer, that's just my thoughts on it. I think that they're cool. I think on this guy, it has Dark Ground typing, so it's also like a ton of weaknesses. And like I said, I've not messed with this guy as much, so, you know, feel free to completely change my mind. I think it's a cool mon. I think I like it more than Wo-Chen, but because I feel mitigating special attacks is just better than mitigating attack, because like you just use an Intimidate mon. But I still feel like a mouse guard or a mouse hold or even like a friend guard Vivillon would provide more team support in that defensive, like supportive role. Because even a mouse would be able to like taunt or encore loop or redirect or even enable things with beat up that like Ting Wu kind of just like, both of these Pokemon suffer for being too selfish and needing too much babysitting while being the support mon. Like they're a support mon, but they're like the main character support mon. And so when you go like all in like that, and you don't have the right defensive tools and you don't have the right amount of like babysitting done, your teams kind of just fall apart if you lose like one piece or you get caught up on one turn. So you could have the coolest, crazy strategy to enable these things, but if things don't go exactly your way, there's like no possible way to win. And so that's just why I don't really feel that I like them all that much. That being said, just a little side note, all of these Pokemon are going to be amazing in singles because they don't have to be babysitted. Like they can put themselves in situations where they can just delete something on the opponent's side or absolutely 1v1 wall. Like Wo-Chien and Ting Wu are great if they only have to deal with one thing at a time. They're absolutely amazing. So if you can get those late game situations where it's just like one at a time, they're absolutely amazing. And I plan on playing them a lot in Regulation C singles. It's going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, that's basically it. I think partners for Ting Wu could be basically anything. He's definitely one of the more splashable defensive option ones. I don't think you just splash a Wo-Chien, but you could definitely splash a Ting Wu for like a niche matchup if you have like a little bit of too much electric weakness or something like that. So like Ting Wu is going to be a good pivot for things like Talonflame and Murkrow openers, I would say. Maybe less Talonflame but more Murkrow. It's probably going to be a good pivot for Palafin. So obviously it's going to be a really, really good pivot for Palafin because Palafin would take huge damage from the electric attacks from like Iron Hands. Ting Wu pivots in on it, forces them to want to go for fighting attacks, and then you pivot into something else. And so like on teams like that, Ting Wu could be really good. But I think that's basically about it. I plan on making a ton of Regulation C content. Don't worry. It's not going to be all negative Nancy's the whole time. But yeah, I feel as though we're going to have this format for 3 months, basically almost the rest of our regional season. And like I said, I feel like it's a Series 2.5, not like a whole brand new game. So let me know if you agree or disagree, and hopefully you guys are excited to, get into the new format. I'll be playing ranked on day 1, and yeah, hopefully I battle as many of you guys as possible. So that's pretty much it. Thank you guys for watching. Peace out. I'll see you guys next time.